Hello and welcome back to the tutorials about SFD Scripting. Last time we did some basics of scripting in general, and also we made the bonus jump. That was very exciting, I believe. And today we will look at some more advanced stuff. For example, loops. Loops are very important if you want to do the same thing to multiple objects. For example, let's spawn some more players. So we'll have player spawn trigger and we'll make them so they are active on startup. So let's just paste like another one here, so there are 3 players in total. I do not want to do that. So add players if well, it doesn't say here, but the players are of type of iObject. I mean they're also iObject. Actually, let's check the documentation first. There is this iPlayer, and if we click on it, it says that iPlayer is iObject, but we really want to talk about players now, so we will say iPlayer, and we'll call the variable player, and we want to do something for each player in game, so game.get players. So this will give us let's actually do it in steps. Let's create a collection of players or an array of players, which we will get by asking the game to give us all the players. These square brackets means it's like a set of players. If we had some other variable, for example a string, you could have like text1 is something, right? Then have a bunch more strings, but obviously you can't name them all the same, so we can have string2, string3, yada yada yada, gets really annoying. So instead you can have an array of strings, which will be just like a new string array with like 3 entries or something. You can have text number 0 is something and number 1 is something else, and it's similar to, like, if you imagine a book has like multiple pages, and on the first page there is like hello, and on the first page there is like, I don't know, or something. And yeah, so the square brackets means there is a multiple of this type. So obviously in the game there are multiple players. Or there can be multiple players. So that's why the brackets are there. So, and we want to do something for every player in that set. In this case, let's just hurt everyone a little bit, because why not? I'm not a psychopath, I swear. So let's just give everyone only 30 health, and this won't work, but I wanna show you why it doesn't work. As you can see, everyone else has still plenty of health, except me, who just has the 30 health we started with. That's because this function on startup runs before the bots spawn. To prove that to you, we can do show chat message. Chat message players.length, and let's do to string, so it actually text Okay, you see it says 1. There is only one player when that function is run. Why is that? That's because this this function runs before the other guys spawn in. Because they are spawning on startup, but this method also runs on startup, and this method happens before these bots spawn in. So we don't want to do this code on startup, but we want it after startup, like this. So now it should say that there are 3 players and everyone will have just 30 health. You see it says 3 and we all have 30 health. This dude has fuzz. Okay, so why did I do that? It's because I wanted to make a button that will heal me, obviously. So let's get a button. On a stick because it's absolutely necessary. Not really. And I will show you, well, the point of this example is that these triggers have a script method which can call a bit of code from the script, and this is showing you how. So the script method must be filled out for the script to run. For example, let's say heal, because that's what the button will be doing. So public void heal trigger args. Okay, it's time for me to talk about functions and methods. I will be using those words interchangeably. They are not really identical, but it's just simpler if I say that it's the same thing. So this function is named heal. It's void, which means it returns void. Let's forget about that right now. And public just means that the game can see this function. I think. Well, also actually doesn't really matter that much. What's important here is these arguments, and this function heal will get called when this button gets pressed, because the button script method is set to heal. And to kind of prove that, we will get this show chat message, and we will do... Oh, actually, as you can see, I've copied this bit of code, but it doesn't work here. It says that the player does not exist in the current context. Why? It's because of something called scope of a variable. You see, the variable players was created in this function, and it only exists inside of this function, right? It doesn't exist in this function. That's why it says it does not exist. If we wanted for this to exist everywhere, we will have to declare it in outside of the scope of this function here, for example, and delete this because that's just a redeclaration that's wrong. So now we can see this is not a problem, because if you kinda look at the brackets, this is inside of the brackets, and this is also inside of those brackets as well, while before it was like this, and this player's variable was only inside of these brackets, right, and not inside anywhere else. So that's why this is a problem. But luckily we don't need this variable here at all, so let's just delete it and put some text into the chat here, so we know the button was pressed and that this method was called. Okay, I am pressing the button and it says heal, so that works just fine. But I'm not actually getting any health, so let's change that. The problem is that I don't want to heal everybody, because I'm evil, obviously, and if I had this code here, that just wouldn't be very good, because everyone would get healed, but that's not what I want. And that's why we have these arguments here. If we press the little question mark in the map editor, it will tell us some basics. That there is, inside of the arguments, there is a caller and a sender. The caller is the button, and the sender is the player who activated the trigger. So let's just get args.sender, that would be the player, and we will do like set health, right? Set health 100, for example. But you see it throws an error. Why? It's because, as the error says, the base object that does not contain definition yada yada yada. You might think, what the hell? The button clearly says it's iPlayer, right? Not really. It means that there is indeed this object is iPlayer, but the script doesn't know that, right? You need to tell the script that it is honestly iPlayer and not just, as the editor says, a base object. For that, I will put the whole thing in brackets and say that it is iPlayer. Now it works just fine, and if we run the code and I press the button, I get fully healed. Amazing. This is, by the way, called casting. When you know the type of the object but the script doesn't, and you tell it what it is, you need to cast it into a different object. You can also do it using the as keyboard. So as iPlayer, it works basically the same way, like not really, but basically the same. And let me just show that it actually also works. So I press it and it heals me. Okay, so what if I want to get healed just a little bit? Well, now we need to do some maths. Luckily we won't be actually doing any maths, the computer will be doing all the maths, but we need to tell it to do the maths. So first, let's say we want to just add like 5 health whenever you press the button. So for that we'll need actually the code that was here already. Instead of set health, we will use get health. And it obviously doesn't need any parameters in the brackets. Yeah, as you can see, these functions, when you call them, they have stuff in brackets, and when you are defining functions, they also have stuff in brackets, and that's basically the stuff that gets sent to the function. If you don't understand that, that's not a big problem. We will surely talk about it more later, presumably. And so yeah, this does get health, but we need to save it somehow. As you can see, the editor says that it is float, which is a type of a number. So we do float, health, I hope that's how you spell it. Doesn't really matter, the code doesn't care. Yeah, so we save the variable, or the how much health the player has, and then actually, you know what, so it is not so confusing. Let's do let's declare iPlayer player. So we basically say that we store it in memory, we store the player in memory and call the memory player. And it works the same way as it did before, but it's just less cumbersome. It's less, it's more obvious what's happening. And especially now, since we are going to use the player again, player.set health. And we want to add like, I don't know, 5 health to that. Let's just make sure it works. So let's just paste that in, and I will be pressing the button, and you see it heals me a little bit each time. Amazing. Yeah, and as you can see, this function also uses a float as its parameter. I did not want to do that, and that's why it works. I will probably explain parameters a bit more in depth slightly later, but you can kind of see how it works already, right? There is just some stuff in brackets, and the function gets that stuff and can work with it, and also we can put stuff in brackets and the other function will get that stuff. Okay, but you might be slightly confused, for example, with this function, right? Because we kinda get data from it and we don't give it anything. This is why we have the return value here. In this case it's void, but in this case it's not void, it's float, which is a data type again. For example, to kinda understand the parameters a bit more, let's make another function. It doesn't really need to be public, but I will make it public anyway. Float get health, and the get health will need player. I mean, it's really a pointless function. I'm just trying to show you how parameters work. And already there is a red squiggle line saying that I'm wrong and that not all code paths return a value. What does that mean? When we specify that the function has a return type, we need to return that type. Otherwise, the compiler will shout at us and the code won't work, and well, we just don't want that. So we do return, and we need to return some kind of floating point number. For example, 5, but that's just not very useful at all, because that's just lying, right? That's not actually how much HP the player has. So we will do player get health. This is like obviously very pointless function. Can't type again. So here it would like store the health of the player and send it via this function. As you can see, it now says that it returns a float, which would be how many HP the player has, but we really don't need that. It's like very pointless, but that's how parameters work and return types work. Okay, so yeah, let's do the same thing as before, but instead of a button, let's do a marker. So, for example, area trigger, right? Every time you go into this area, you get a bit of health. So let's call that heal, and let me just get the code that was here before back. So yeah, like this. Okay, and it should work just fine, right? Let me just prepare a crate here, because I want to show you something. And okay, so we have the new code in, and I've put it inside a wrong method. We want this on enter method, because that happens when something enters the area. So every time amazing, it doesn't work at all. Actually, I'm not sure what's happening here. Oh yeah, I forgot to add the health. And I'm doing the tutorial, huh? Well, so now if I go into the area, it gives me a little bit of health. Right, amazing. Absolutely flawless, can't ever break except error. What I just did here is I threw the crate inside the area, right? Why is that a problem? It's because the crate is not a player, but we are telling the script that the sender or the thing that has entered the area is a player, which is a lie, and that's why the compiler hates us. or not the compiler, the script does. The compiler trusts us, he's a friend. So yeah, there are multiple ways to solve that. The smarter one would be to just say, hey, only players can activate this, and now if I throw a box here, nothing happens, and it still works for me, which is smart, but not showing the point I want to get across. So we can use an if statement, and we can ask if it is a player or not. So if the args.caller is iPlayer, then only in that case we should do the healing. If it's not, don't do anything, just don't do anything, yeah. So it should work pretty much the same as it did just a second ago. When I throw the box inside, nothing happens. Just to make it extra clear, let's do an else statement and do game.showChat message not a player. Okay, and if the box goes into the area, the chat starts spamming not a player. Makes sense, but it still works for us. Apparently it freaking doesn't. Amazing. What did I do wrong? Oh, this should be sender. Because caller is this thing, the area itself. The sender is the object that triggered the area. Well, that wasn't confusing at all, definitely not. So yeah, it still heals me, but the box is not a player. Okay, amazing. But one interesting thing is that actually, if we check the documentation of iPlayer, and if we go through here, there actually isn't anything about health. There is this get boost health, but there is no just get health. Why is that? Well, if you take a look here, this little diagram says that iPlayer is also an object, and well, because a player is an object, all the stuff that is inside of an object is also inside of a player. So if we click on iObject and start looking here, you can see that, oh, get health is actually in the object, not in the player. So why does this work? Well, it's because the sender is a player and also an object. But we can actually change this to, we can change the whole thing to iObject, like this, and now it will still work, it will still heal me, and it won't get mad when there is a box, because it would heal the box if the box had a health bar, and it actually kinda has. Let me just kinda punch it a couple of times until it turns slightly gray. Now it's kinda gray, right? But if I put it in the area, now it's back to being not as gray again, because it has more health. Great. So yeah, that's just some random things you might want to know. If you actually want for me to make like a tutorial about something you want to know, then probably like write a comment or send me a message on Discord or something like that, because I honestly don't know what should the tutorials be about. like if you kind of got the basics, then you can just start with these tutorials here, and because these tutorials are really quite good, like this quite advanced script which starts spawning mines, it's will tell you a lot. Actually, that one is kind of complicated, but I don't know, this spawning object script, right? It's quite interesting. So yeah, check that out. And if you have any like requests for tutorial, then tell me on Discord or write a comment down below. Actually, writing me a message would be better. I probably won't really read those comments. Well, anyway, until next time, goodbye.